Okay, this is a slightly tricky video about a slightly tricky concept that can be quite hard to get your head around, but it is important because it leads to avoiding a common class of mistake. This is a program called StringEquals, and the key point is this bit here, which says fruit1 equals fruit2. Now, that's essentially a check to see whether fruit1 is equal to fruit2, and at first sight it looks this should be fine because we've declared fruit1 to be lemon and fruit2 to be lemon. Incidentally, we'll be getting on to if in more detail later on, but basically what's happening here is that if this thing in the brackets is true, fruit1 is equal to fruit2, then we do everything between these curly brackets here, which prints out this message to the screen. Now, if these were numbers, integers, this would be absolutely fine and not a problem. But because they're not, it isn't. But unfortunately, it works anyway most of the time, which is actually bad, believe it or not. A string is a more complicated thing than an integer, and actually you can tell whether a piece of data is a more complicated thing in Java by the first letter of the word. So if you look back at integers, they begin with a lowercase letter, so Boolean begin with a lowercase letter, char begins with a lowercase letter, so does double, but string begins with an uppercase letter, and that means it's a more complex structure. In fact, it's something we'll be coming back to later in the module. Now, the problem is when you compare these two more complicated things, you're not comparing the actual values themselves. You're not comparing lemon with lemon. You're comparing where these things are stored in the memory of the computer. Okay. Now, because we've created two separate ones, fruit1 and fruit2, then it looks as if they should be stored in two separate areas of the memory of the computer. So we're not checking whether the actual letters are the same, we're checking whether these things are stored in the same place, and it looks as though they shouldn't be, and therefore this should not work. And to be clear, we don't want, and I don't want you to be going and comparing strings like this with this equals equals. I'll show you how to do that in a minute. Unfortunately, and this is really unpleasantly unhelpful, this does work, because if I actually save this, I've already compiled it actually, if I go back and run it, you'll see, thought this shouldn't work. So this is printing out this message here, and it's printing out this message here because actually these two things are equal, and the reason they're equal is because Java's clever enough to work out and say, aha, actually these contain the same value, therefore I won't waste my time making two separate ones, I'll just make one, and I'll just make these things here point to or refer to the same piece of data. So in practice this does actually work. Now you might be thinking, well, what's the problem? Well, here's the problem, okay? Because Java isn't super clever when it comes to these things, and it is actually easy to fool it and end up with things that you think are going to work but aren't going to work. So we've got two string variables again here, okay? One's banana and one's banana split, okay? So they're clearly not equal to each other. However, what we've done here is we've gone and created a new variable which we've called devious. The way we've created that is we've taken banana split and we've done this substring 0,6 thing. Now what that basically does is says starting at location 0, take the first 6 letters, which happen to be the word banana, and extract them from dessert. So now devious and fruit both say banana. The trouble is Java isn't clever enough to work that one out. It would know if we'd said banana and banana here, but this is just beyond its capability to work out that actually I can just simply make it share that one. So now this is not true, and if we run this program, I'm just going to comment this bit out for a minute down here, because that would be, and I'm going to save and recompile it. Might be best if I just simply Java. Type it again. It doesn't print anything out, and it doesn't print anything out there because this is not true, and that's the problem. Comparing strings like this works quite often, but not all the time. So what do we have to do about this? Well, the way we have to do about this is we have to come up with a way of not comparing where these things are stored in the memory of the computer, but actually comparing their actual values. And this is the way you have to do it. It's a bit clumsy in terms of notation, but this is what you've got to write. So you take one of your variables, in this case we've taken fruit, and we've put after it dot equals, and then in brackets we put the one we want to compare it to, which is devious. Okay, so this dot equals thing actually goes and checks to see what is the actual stored value, not where the thing is in the memory of the computer. So if we do this again, now we should find that actually it does print Banana Republic. So it has worked out that fruit and devious are equal. They both say banana. One thing I haven't tried, and it's probably a bit risky, is I'm going to try swapping these over, because this should work too. It shouldn't matter which order you do these things in. So we could say, does devious equal fruit? And again, it prints Banana Republic. That's true. You might think, well, why is this funny notation here? Why have we got this dot here and these brackets here? That's something I'm afraid you're going to have to take on trust or later on in the module, but it will become a bit clearer when we start dealing with modules with classes and objects.